two black kids from the Midwest born 12 weeks apart in 1958. One of them made a record that has outsold every other album ever released. The other, one played every instrument on his own debut before he turned 20. For about 6 years, they were the two biggest musicians alive, and people have been arguing about which one was better ever since. We are going to actually settle that, and not on vibes. On the record, the charts, the awards, the 4 nights they were in the same room, and the one collaboration that never happened. Fair warning about where this ends up though. Both of them spent the last stretch of their careers in the biggest fight of their lives, and it was not against each other. Keep that in your back pocket. Before any of that, take 10 seconds and just remember what these two men were. Not the tabloid versions and not the estate versions, the artists. If that is the video you came for, hit the like button and subscribe, because this channel runs on stories like this one. Start with the two houses they grew up in. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958 in Gary, Indiana. He was the 8th of 10 children. His father, Joe, worked at a steel mill and ran the house like a rehearsal room. By the time Michael was 6, he was performing. By 11, he was the lead singer of a group signed to Motown, and I Want You Back was the #1 song in America. Think about what that does to a person. Michael learned his craft in front of cameras. Every skill he had was tested in public, in real time, in front of people who were paying. He became the greatest performer of his generation because performing was the only thing he had ever done. 350 miles northwest, Prince Rogers Nelson was born on June 7, 1958, in Minneapolis. His father, John, was a jazz pianist. His mother, Maddie, sang. They named him after his father's band. His parents split when he was young, and Prince bounced between houses until he landed in a friend's basement with a piano in it. That basement is where the rest of it comes from. There was no Motown machine around him and no audience to sharpen him, just a kid teaching himself keyboards, then guitar, then bass, then drums, alone for years. In 1977, at 19 years old, Prince signed with Warner Brothers. He negotiated something almost unheard of for a teenager. He produced himself. On his first album, For You, the credit reads that he played all 27 instruments, so you already have the whole rivalry in miniature. One of them was built by an industry, the other one refused to be handled by anyone. They would not stay in separate lanes for long. In late 1982, both men released the album that would define them. Michael's came out on November 30th. Thriller spent 37 weeks at #1. It became the best-selling album ever made, and it has never been passed. In February 1984, he walked out of the Grammys with 8 awards in a single night, a record at the time. But the Grammys were not even the moment. On May 16, 1983, 47 million people sat down to watch a Motown anniversary special on NBC, and Michael performed Billie Jean and moonwalked on television for the first time. He was not supposed to sing it. Producers had banned everyone from performing new material, and he pushed until they let him. One song, one night, and it changed what people thought a pop star could be. Then, in December, he released a 14-minute horror film for Thriller, and MTV, a channel that had barely played black artists, put it in heavy rotation and left it there. Prince's 1999 came out 6 weeks before Thriller, and it did a smaller version of the same job for him. It was his breakthrough. It got him onto MTV, and it made him a star. It just did not make him Michael. So for most of that year, Prince was watching a man born the same year as him turn into the biggest entertainer on earth, and he was watching it from second place. Then came 1984. Purple Rain was released on June 25th, and the film followed a month later. On August 4th, the album hit #1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for 24 consecutive weeks, all the way to January 18th, 1985. It sold 13 million copies in the United States alone. When Doves Cry sat at #1 for 5 weeks and finished as the biggest single of the year. For a stretch that summer, Prince had the #1 album, the #1 single, and the #1 movie in America simultaneously. Before him, only Elvis Presley and the Beatles had ever done that. So now the press had a story. 2 young black artists, same age, both crossing over to white rock audiences, both selling in numbers nobody had seen. Every magazine in the country ran the matchup. Vibe would eventually build an entire issue around it. Here is the thing though, the press invented the framing. It did not invent the tension. The tension was already there, and it had a specific date. First, understand where Prince's head was that month. 2.5 weeks earlier, on August 3rd, he had played a benefit show at First Avenue in Minneapolis and recorded the live take that became the song Purple Rain. He was also bleeding people. Vanity had walked out of the film. He had fired Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis out of the time. He was building the biggest project of his life, and pieces kept coming off in his hands. August 20th, 1983. James Brown is playing the Beverly Theater in Los Angeles. Both of them are in the audience. Brown spots Michael in the crowd and starts calling his name. Michael comes up, does about 40 seconds of footwork, kisses Brown on the cheek, and the room loses its mind. Then Michael leans over and whispers something to James Brown. He told Brown that Prince was in the building. Brown starts calling for Prince. He says the name once, twice. He keeps going 6 times while the crowd looks around. Prince's backing vocalist Jill Jones later said nobody in their party had any idea he was going to be called up. He was just sitting there. Prince eventually comes up, riding on the shoulders of his bodyguard, Big Chick Huntsberry. He pulls a glove off with his teeth and throws it into the crowd. He picks up a guitar, plays a short, scratchy solo, takes his shirt off, does some footwork, and then on the way out, he grabs a prop lamppost and knocks the thing over. It is chaos, and depending on who you ask, it is either the torch getting passed or a man getting ambushed. Prince's tour manager Alan Leeds has been direct about which one he thinks it was. His account is that Prince was furious, that he felt Michael had set him up, and that he hated every second of being up there. Leeds put the reason plainly: you do not follow Michael Jackson. Now, was it actually a setup? There is no way to prove that. Michael may have simply been excited that another star was in the room. We only have Prince's camp's read on it. But that read is what mattered, because from that night forward, the people around Prince describe a man who treated Michael Jackson as a competitor rather than a colleague. And 18 months later, Prince made a decision that handed Michael the biggest win of the whole rivalry. And it had nothing to do with music. The American Music Awards, the Shrine Auditorium, Los Angeles. Prince is nominated in 10 categories. He is up against Thriller, which at that point is the biggest album on the planet. He beats it. Purple Rain takes Favorite Pop Rock Album over Thriller. Prince wins 3 awards that night, and he collects them wearing a hooded purple jacket with Big Chick standing behind him. On the scoreboard, this is his night. Except across town, something else was happening. Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie had written the charity single for famine relief in Ethiopia, and 45 of the biggest artists in America were driving straight from the award show to A&M Studios to record it. The song was "We Are the World." Lionel Richie spent a long stretch of that night on the phone trying to get Prince into the building. Richie has said he told him everyone was down there waiting on him. Prince asked whether he could record his part in a separate room. Then he did not show up at all. Instead, he went to a club on the Sunset Strip. Around 2 in the morning, his bodyguards got into it with 2 photographers outside. Both bodyguards were arrested on misdemeanor battery charges. So the Wire stories the next day wrote themselves. While 45 musicians were recording a famine relief single, Prince's security was in a fight with paparazzi and then in a jail cell. The Los Angeles Times later summed up the public reaction by saying, "It made a lot of people think he was an arrogant jerk." His own guitarist, Wendy Melvoin, has said the band was embarrassed, and that this was the point where something in him started to shift. For the record, he did contribute. He gave the USA for Africa album an original song called "For the Tears in Your Eyes." Almost nobody noticed because it was not the story. That night is the hinge of the entire rivalry. It was the first time the two of them were compared on something other than sales, and Michael won it without doing anything at all. 2 years later, Michael made him an offer that could have ended the whole thing. Michael Jackson had a problem in 1987. He had to follow Thriller, and there is no way to follow Thriller. Part of his answer was the title track of the new album, and he wanted Prince on it. Producer Quincy Jones has confirmed the invitation was real, and that Prince came to Michael's home to talk about it. Sheila E. was at Paisley Park when the demo arrived. Her account is that Prince played it for the room, heard the opening line, said one word of disbelief, and walked away from the speakers. The opening line of Bad is, "Your butt is mine." 10 years later, Chris Rock asked Prince about it directly. Prince said, "Who's gonna sing that to whom?" because, as he put it, Michael was not going to sing it to him, and he was not going to sing it to Michael, so right there they had a problem. He also pointed out the other half of it. In the Bad video, the rival character went to Wesley Snipes. Prince's line was basically, "Picture that video with me in it." Quincy Jones remembers the refusal as polite. His recollection is that Prince told him the song would be a hit. Without him, he was right. Bad, the album, has sold around 35 million copies worldwide. There is a coda to this that only came out recently. Sheila E. says that after turning the song down, Prince got curious, took the band into the studio at Paisley, and recorded his own version of Bad just to hear what it would sound like in his hands. She says it was extraordinary. She also says Prince erased it. It does not exist. The petty stuff kept going too. During the Under the Cherry Moon period, Michael reportedly visited Prince and got talked into a game of ping pong, which Prince reportedly won with a spike and some trash talk. And will.i.am has told a version of a later Las Vegas story, relayed by journalist Steve Knopper, where Prince clocked that Michael was in the audience at one of his shows, walked over, and played bass directly in his face. According to will.i.am, Michael was still asking about it at breakfast the next morning, genuinely bothered. By then, though, both of them were fighting a much bigger opponent than each other. Michael's peak as a live performer landed on January 31st, 1993, at the Rose Bowl. Before that day, the Super Bowl halftime show was a bathroom break, marching bands and novelty acts. NBC only called him because the year before, Fox had counter-programmed halftime with an In Living Color special and pulled millions of viewers off the game. He played about 12 minutes. 133.4 million Americans watched, and for the first time in the history of the Super Bowl, more people watched the halftime show than watched the first half of the football. Sales of Dangerous jumped afterward. Every halftime show since then, including the one Prince played 14 years later, exists because of that afternoon. Later that same year, the first child abuse allegations against Michael became public, and from there the story stops being about who is bigger and starts being about who owns the work. Michael went to war with Sony over the handling of his catalog and his masters, a fight that spilled into public accusations against label executives. He also spent the back half of his life under the shadow of child abuse allegations. He was charged and tried in 2005, and he was acquitted on all counts, but his public image never fully recovered. Prince fought the same fight in a stranger way. In 1993, he changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol because Warner Brothers controlled the name Prince as a brand and controlled how often he could release music. He wrote the word slave on his cheek and did interviews that way. He got out of the contract in 1996 and immediately released a 3-hour album called Emancipation, which tells you exactly what the fight had been about. He wanted to put out everything, immediately, forever. Remember what I told you to keep in your back pocket? Here it is. Two men with opposite public images, both spending their 40s making the identical argument, which is that the person who made the music should own the music. The biggest fight of either man's life was not with the other one. It was with the company holding his masters. Which brings us back to the question, who is actually better? Michael has the numbers. Thriller is still the best-selling album in history, certified over 30 times platinum in the United States. 13 #1 singles on the Hot 100 as a solo artist. 13 Grammys, 8 of them in one night. Prince has the catalog. 7 Grammys, an Oscar for the Purple Rain score, 5 #1 singles of his own, and a stack of hits he wrote for other people, including Nothing Compares to You, Manic Monday, and A Glamorous Life. Around 39 studio albums. Most of the instruments on most of them played by him. And look at where the influence went. Everything about modern pop stardom, the choreography, the short film as a single, the stadium show as an event, traces back to Michael. Everything about the modern independent artist, owning your masters, releasing on your own clock, playing every part yourself, traces back to Prince. Line those up, and you notice the categories barely overlap because they were never doing the same job. Michael Jackson was the greatest performer of the 20th century. Prince was the greatest musician of it. So here is the answer, and it is not a dodge. If better means the most people ever moved by one human being on a stage, it is Michael, and it is not close. If better means the most music ever made by one pair of hands, it is Prince, and that is not close either. Anyone who gives you a single name is giving you their own taste with a stat sheet stapled to it. On February 4th, 2007, in Miami, a torrential rainstorm sat over the Super Bowl, and the halftime producers were terrified because Prince was about to play 4 electric guitars on a slick stage in a downpour. Producer Don Mister called him to check on it. Prince asked him if he could make it rain harder. Then he played Purple Rain in actual Purple Rain and turned in what Billboard would later rank as the greatest halftime show ever staged. 2 years later, Michael was preparing the biggest comeback in music. 50 shows at the O2 in London, sold out, called This Is It. He was 50 years old and he had not toured in over a decade. On June 25, 2009, he died at his rented house in Los Angeles during those rehearsals. The cause was acute propofol intoxication, and his personal physician was convicted of involuntary manslaughter 2 years later. Prince said almost nothing in public about it. Prince kept working right up to the end. His last tour was him alone with a piano, no band. He played his final show at the Fox Theater in Atlanta on April 14, 2016. On the flight home, his plane made an emergency landing in Illinois. 6 days later, on April 21st, he was found dead at Paisley Park at 57 years old from an accidental fentanyl overdose. Neither of them made it to 60. Here is what is strange. The rivalry is still running without them. In April of 2026, the Michael Jackson biopic starring his nephew Jafar Jackson opened in theaters. In July, it crossed $1 billion worldwide, which no biopic in history had ever done. It passed Bohemian Rhapsody at $911 million, and it passed Oppenheimer at $976 million, and it is still climbing. And on August 28th, Prince's estate is releasing Timeless, 10 unreleased vault recordings stretching from a track he cut as a teenager in 1977 to a live performance from the last year of his life. Only a fraction of that vault has been digitized so far, which means this goes on for decades. 40 years later, they are still trading turns. The last word probably belongs to Prince. When Chris Rock asked him straight out whether there had ever been a rivalry with Michael Jackson, Prince said there never was. One, at least not from where he was sitting. Whether you believe that depends entirely on which version you believe of One Night at the Beverly Theater in 1983. Next episode, I want to do the man standing behind half of this story. Quincy Jones produced Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. He watched the Prince negotiation happen from the inside. And by the end, he and Michael were not speaking. That one is coming. Subscribe so you catch it.